daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's start out the show by, I want to just say from my family to all the families suffering from the floods and the tornadoes here in the great United States of America, our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family, and it is literally an ongoing story. And we were truly blessed here to have perfect weather for Memorial Day weekend, and the whole weekend. I went fishing the whole weekend. It was great. I'll probably do a report on that in a day or so on my Facebook page. But yesterday here, our family celebrated Memorial Day, so I posted all this, but I want to say thank you personally to all of those families who have paid the ultimate price in sacrificing for the freedoms over the generations that we have come to sometimes take for granted. I can tell you here in the Martin household, we do not take those freedoms for granted, and we are eternally grateful for those who have sacrificed so much to give us that freedom. I also want to make a quick note about Friday's show in case you didn't see it. There was a reason. We had some technical difficulties, which I hope we have resolved for today's show. We couldn't get it up in time. I posted it on my personal Facebook site, so if you missed it and you'd like to see it, it's on John Martin Talks, not my personal site, but my, I guess my professional site. So go to John Martin Talks on Facebook, like it if you haven't already, and share it with others. But those of you who are watching on Citizens for Trump and places like Deplorable Resistance, first of all, thank you so much for your support. Welcome back to the show. But if you want to see Friday's show, just go to John Martin Talks and you can see it. I think it was a pretty good show. All right, we're going to get right into it. And we've got several articles today that they all kind of join together. And I think if you stay tuned, you will see exactly what I mean. This first one is from NBC News, and it's kind of old news and new news to a certain extent, or I guess you could say ongoing news, because it involves impeaching 45. Impeach 45! New activist campaign puts impeachment pressure on House Democrats. A liberal activist group is ramping up pressure on Democratic congressional leaders with a new campaign to begin impeachment proceedings against President Donald Trump. So what's new about that? Well, to a certain extent, I guess it's new that this group has now decided to start funding it. But they've been in force for a couple of years because, as we know, the main reason to impeach Donald Trump is he's guilty of a crime, right? He's guilty of the worst crime in history. Don't tune out before I tell you what that is. The worst crime in the history of presidential politics. He won, and that's the only reason they need. This group literally started, and we'll tell you more about them in just a moment, but this group literally started as the president was getting sworn in, so to speak. Stand Up America, it's called, which says it has amassed 2.4 million members since former congressional candidate Sean Eldridge founded it after Trump's election. So Trump got elected, and immediately they formed this group about impeaching him from the beginning. And it will begin pushing those members to call, confront, and otherwise lobby Democratic members of the House to start the impeachment process. So they're going to get their House members. They got to convince them, right? I've been telling you, if you've seen the show, you'll know this. But if you haven't, you need to tune in every day. Go to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. There's multiple sites we're on as well. But this is a total waste of time and money. But hey, I got no problem with it. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on. But it's not like they have to lobby these congressmen and women, not on the Democratic side. They're all for impeachment, period. They're just weighing the political part of it. They're for impeachment. Don't think for a minute just because Nancy Pelosi is cautioning her members and trying to slow them down, as they say, on impeachment, that she's not 100% for it. They're all for it. I warned you about that leading up to the 2018 midterm elections, that if the House was taken over by the Dems, that they would seek impeachment. And I don't think it was that difficult a prediction if you paid any attention, but that's what happened. They got elected and they are pushing impeachment. The only hesitation is not because they don't want to get rid of Trump, is that they're afraid it might backfire on them. That's the only hesitation. So they don't really need to lobby these people, but by all means, go ahead. The campaign kicks off on today, Tuesday, when the group will begin running digital ads to broadcast its message while also emailing and text messaging its members with information on how to contact their representatives. So they're so active they don't have any clue how to contact their representatives. You know, you could Google it, but Google is of the devil. I'm just warning you. But again, it is a total waste of time and money. But it's their time to waste and their money. I hope they spend it all. Eldridge, the husband of Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes, said, and before I read you what he said, I got to thinking about it. Why are so many gay married men couples like How do you say his name? I apologize, Billy. But if you haven't met Billy Bob, he's my psychic sidekick if you're just tuning in. He kind of keeps me straight here, by the way. He has a Twitter following. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But why are all these gay people like Butt Get and his, what is his name? Christian Butt Edge or whatever, his husband? And of course, this guy here is married to Chris Eldridge, Sean Eldridge. Is that how I say it? Make sure, I want to get these names correct. Let me make sure. Yes, it's Sean Eldridge is married to co-founder of Facebook, Chris Hughes. So why are these gay people so opposed to Trump? I mean, if they really followed it, Trump is trying to protect gay people. I mean, he was the one that is trying to stop people like that shot up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. He's trying to stop that from happening. He's opposed to the nation or the religion of peace, and we'll talk more about that maybe too. But anyway, Eldridge, the husband of Facebook co-founder, said when some progressives demanded impeachment after Trump fired then FBI Director James Comey, which he had every right to, by the way, and Bill Clinton, just for the record, did basically the same thing. He fired the FBI Director shortly after he became president. People don't want to talk about that. But he said, I thought we should let special counsel Robert Mueller do his job. Well, Mueller did his job. The report is out, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the Mueller report came up with squadouche on the president. Basically, it totally exonerated him from Russian collusion for sure and obstruction of justice, because you can't obstruct justice from a crime that was not committed. But it doesn't matter because the Mueller report, and this is what a lot of people need to understand. The progressives love the Mueller report as long as it was hamstringing the president with the threat that it might produce something that impeached him. Now that it's come out and it's basically an exoneration of Trump, then the Mueller report doesn't need to be protected anymore. Even Mueller doesn't have the time of day for these congressional Democrats. He doesn't want to get caught up in that circus. But when Mueller's report redacted report was released detailing Trump's criminal conduct, of course that criminal conduct, the only criminal conduct, what? Criminal conduct. The only criminal conduct, as I said before, is he won. And I suppose that is all they need. But the criminal conduct believe Democrats in Congress should hold Watergate-style hearings to air the evidence, subpoena key witnesses, and obtain Mueller's full report considering impeachment. Now, you know what key witnesses they're talking about? People who have already testified under oath to the Mueller report. They've already done that. So why do they need to do it again? Just read the report. They don't want to read the report. They want the unredacted version, not to get at the truth, but so they can leak it. That's all. But this fella now says, I'm convinced that it's time to stop waiting. In other words, we got to impeach 45. And I've talked about this before, but if I say it, it certainly bears repeating. What's really going on here is, Al Green, and I'm not talking about the singer, the preacher Al Green. I wish I was talking about the Reverend Love and Happiness. I wish I was talking about him because he probably supports Trump. But hey, I don't know for sure. I certainly support him. But this Al Green is that congressman from Texas that's been pushing impeachment on Trump. And he literally admitted why he was doing it, why he was trying to file or did file it, because he feared not that Trump had did anything wrong. He feared that Trump might win the 2020 election if they didn't impeach him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what this is about. It's not about trying to get Trump on any particular crimes. It's about two things: overturning the 2016 election, which they just can't let go, and preventing Trump from winning re-election in 2020. That's all this is about, and expect more and more of this. Pressure has been growing on Pelosi from both within and outside her caucus since the release of the Mueller report, and as the White House has tried to stymie congressional investigations. You know why he's tried to stymie investigations? Because the Mueller report has already been released and he's already cooperated. He didn't even exercise executive privilege, which any other president would have done. There's no question about that. Trump fully cooperated with Mueller, and they got squadouche, and they don't care. Because the purpose of the Mueller report was twofold, as I say. One, it accomplished. The first part of the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation, I should say, was accomplished. It, to a certain extent, to a large extent, hamstrung the president during his first 2 years in office. The second part has failed miserably, and that's what's got the Democrats so pissed off, and that is they couldn't find any evidence of Russian collusion, any real evidence of obstruction, because as I say, you can't obstruct a crime that was never committed. It's not possible. And so they are disappointed with the second part of the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation's purpose, which was the, quote, insurance policy. I still believe that old Stroke and Strock, or Stroke and Strock, or however you want, those FBI hoodlums put out when they said they had an insurance policy. That insurance policy, I firmly believe, was the Mueller report. But they're not giving up. They're not giving up. Representative John Yarmuth, you might say who, I have never heard of him, which says a lot because I pay pretty close attention to this, Democrat from Kentucky, chairman of the House Budget Committee, said on MSNBC Saturday, he said, "I'm one of those who believes that we will inevitably have an impeachment proceeding. And if we don't, then we've actually neglected our duty under the Constitution." Neglected your duty, eh? How? How have you neglected your duty under the Constitution? The duty under the Constitution is to protect and defend the United States of America. What are you guys doing about that? You're all for open borders and a welfare state. You're for letting people who are admitted enemies of the United States in. President Trump has tried to stand up in every way. I know, in case I forget to talk about this, and we're not going to get too in-depth, but kudos to President Trump for standing up for the motorcyclists that wanted to ride on Memorial Day, to Rolling Thunder. Power to you. As one I'm not a member of Rolling Thunder. I might consider joining it now, but I appreciate President Trump standing up for freedom-loving Americans of all persuasions. Back to the article. In calling for impeachment, Stand Up America, that's this organization, joins other progressive groups like Move On and Need to Impeach, which was founded by California billionaire Tom Steyer, who said, "I'm announcing today," a while back, he had one of those press conferences, "I am not running for president." Wow. Who has been waging, this is Tom Steyer, who has been waging sometimes a lonely crusade. Don't you feel sorry for that billionaire? On issue of over a year, spending tens of millions of dollars of his own money to run TV ads and host events. Please, let me tell you, because the one thing we found out for sure now is that they accused the Republicans of being the party of the millionaires, and they might be. But one thing we know for sure, that the party of the billionaires is the Democratic Party, because they're like lined up to all you billionaires out there that want to spend money on the Democratic Party, especially on impeaching the president, please do. Make my day. Please spend all of your money. Spend every dime you got. Spend your way into poverty, brother, so that you can defeat the president, because I don't think it's going to work. All right, we're going to move on. And this next is opinion piece by Brett Stevens. He's an editorial writer for the New York Times. And I got to tell you, man, this is one of the better articles I've seen all year. And so I try to edit these quite a bit, but this one I edited only slightly. But I'm going to try to cover a lot of it because I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you will. Anyway, it's called by Bret Stephens' opinion piece in New York Times, How Trump Wins Next Year. In other words, in 2020, wins re-election. More than 6 million Indians cast their ballots over the past 6 weeks, talking about Indians from India. In the largest Democratic election in the world, Donald Trump won. So it's Trumptopia, man, in India right now. He goes on to say, a week ago, several million Australians, Australians went to the polls in another touchstone election. Trump won. So Trump won in India, and he won down under. Trump world, baby. Space Force. The universe is next. That's why that might be why President Trump is starting Space Force, because maybe he's going to run for Emperor of the Universe next. Citizens of European Union, according to this article, member states are voting in elections for the mostly toothless but symbolically significant European Parliament. Here too, Trumpism will mark its territory. So I guess Trump's the big dog. Excuse me while I get this out. Trump's marking territory all over the world. He's like, another dog, like Snoop Dogg, right? Trump is living his best life. Ain't going back and forth with you. He's living his best life. Trump, man, he is the fajizzle for sure. Legislative elections in the Philippines, so this thing is worldwide, this month would further cemented the rule of Rodrigo Duterte, were another win for Trumpism. Trump, man, Trump, all over the world. Ditto for Benjamin Netanyahu, re-election in Israel last month, the election of Jair Bolsonaro, president of Brazil last October. Now think about this. In Brazil, that's one of the few countries down in South America and Central America that people aren't fleeing now because maybe they elected their own version of Trump. You ever thought about that? And Italy's elevation of Matteo Salvini several months before that. We're going to talk about Italian elections more. But I got this idea about something that I know a lot of people, hang on just a minute. So I want to make this really clear. This, by the way, if you haven't seen, is a cup my lovely wife gave me. It says, I want you on my side of the wall, and has Emperor Trump right on it right there. But, I know a lot of my listeners are outright opposed and certainly concerned about the UN and all of that. But I got an idea how we could save the UN. Now, it's going to take a few years because we got to wait till after President Trump serves his second term. But after President Trump serves his second term, why don't we push for Trump to be Secretary General of the UN, man? We can have Trump be in the New World Order. Boy, that's a scare. That right there. You talk about global warming and snowflakes, man. The snowflakes will absolutely vanish if Trump became Secretary of the UN. Just a thought. A wildly crazy one, I agree. But if past is prologue, according to this opinion piece, expect the Trumpist Tory Boris Johnson to succeed Theresa May as Prime Minister of Britain too. Now, I'm open for Nigel Farage, but I don't know if he's going to run, but he's certainly making his name known once again. And this article goes on to say, and I'll say I love this opinion piece is great, man. I agree with it, but for probably different reasons than the writer intended. In 2016, at a campaign rally in Albany, Trump warned, we're going to win so much, you may get tired of winning, and you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. And he goes on, then he says, tell us about it. So, in other words, they can't take it anymore. They can't take it, not his supporters. But let me just tell you, I want to channel my innermost Hillary and get all Southern fried on you here and say, man, when it comes, are you tired of winning? Well, let me tell you, me and Billy Bob, we ain't no ways tired. No, I'll be like Hillary. Ain't no ways tired. No way. I'm tired of winning. Trump's name, of course, was in none of the ballots he talked about all over the world in these recent elections. His critics should take no comfort in that. No comfort at all that he wasn't elected already Emperor of the world. In India, Narendra Modi won his re-election largely on the strength of his appeals to Hindu nationalism and anti-Muslim sentiment. In other words, Murder Incorporated, which is what the Muslims have been doing in India since they gained their independence. Two things happened when India gained its independence. One, they gained their independence, and second, the Muslims started killing everybody. And that has really, I mean, you talk about Murder Incorporated. So why would the Indians, especially Hindu Indians, which are the majority, vast majority, why would they fear Muslims? Just a question. So he goes on to break down why this is happening. So we're going to break the paragraph down as it goes. In Australia, incumbent Scott Morrison ran against the high cost of climate action, including lost jobs, and won a stunning upset. So the winner in Australia basically said, hey, we can't afford all this, their version of a Green New Deal. So I wonder, here we got jackasses on jackasses, because as I've said before, the first question at the Democratic debate should be, how many of you believe in the Green New Deal? And they'll raise their hand like that. And then the next question will be, how'd you get here? And if it wasn't on the back of a jackass, then you are insincere. So I guess in Australia, it'd be kangaroos on kangaroos. I don't know if that's the right analogy or not. It'd be kind of different, right? Maybe we get some kangaroos over here, man. Put the little 2020, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Put the little 2020 candidates, because they're all mental midgets compared to the Trumpster. Put them in the pouch and let me hopping along like that. And they could have their gear in the back on the jackass. So it'd be the kangaroo and jackasses. I'm trying to bring the world together here. In the UK, Trump surrogate Nigel Farage, my hero, looks like he and his Brexit party will be the runaway victors in the European elections. I don't think that's quite happening, but they're certainly stirring it up. But when I think about this, and the criticism of like Nigel Farage and people who are for Brexit, it's like, OMG, man. Oh my God, the will of the people, the voting public in the UK voted to Brexit, to leave the European Union. And the problem is that the swamp is so deep in England and the EU, they don't want to let them go. That's the problem. That people who always talk about democracy, democracy, don't actually believe in democracy, especially when it doesn't go their way. In Brazil and the Philippines, the political appeal of Bolsonaro and Duarte seems to be inversely correlated to their respect for human rights and rule of law, to say nothing of modern ethical pieties. So I decided to look up that word, the definition of pieties. It says here, pieties, you refer to statements about what is morally right as pieties when you think they are insincere or unrealistic. Politicians who constantly intone pieties about respect for the rule of law. So in other words, if you're standing up for your nation, if you're putting your country first, if you're like the MAGA people, America first, and you stand up for the rule of law, somehow you're crazy, absolutely crazy. So, I guess people staying in there, we can't have that. We can't have people going against, being for the rule of law. Sorry about that. And people staying in their own country. My God, we can't have that. The common thread here isn't just right-wing populism. And let me just tell you, I'm sick and tired of hearing about that. I'm sick and tired of people standing up for their own country are considered right-wing. So if you say, well, I think we should put America first, you're right-wing. If you vote to leave the European Union, you're right-wing. If you're opposed to millions of people immigrating into like Germany, the Muslims coming into Germany that are terrorists, by the way, that are causing all kinds of problems. We're going to talk specifically about that in a moment. You're right wing. I'm just tired of that, man. And then it goes on here to say, this writer says, in contempt for the ideology of them before us, the immigrant before the native born. So you're racist, he says, you're racist if you are for native born people over immigrants. You're racist. And I'm thinking about, especially when it comes to like the European Union and all, most of their immigrants are coming from the Middle East, right? Well, they're saying, okay, they're coming over here for freedom. Well, what about Trump? Remember when Trump early on talking about the Iraqi oil or the Iraq war said, well, maybe we should take the oil to pay for it. And that was considered like racism and everything else. But now they can just come over into Europe and take over, and it's not racist. It's racist to call them out. It's crazy, man. Common sense is lacking. And it says here, are of the global or transitional interest before the national or local one. So if you put your own national interest first, let alone local interest first, then you are against the New World Order. And yeah, I think that's probably true, against the New World Order. But you know how you might get some of us on board, like I said before? If you want to get some of us dregs of society, some of us, MAGA hat wearing sons of a gun, the basket of deplorables, as Hillary said, if you want to get us on board, then get behind President Trump two ways. One, becoming the 2020 elected president, re-elected president, I should say. And then after he's through, we can start the Trump for Secretary General. I don't know if he could actually, I guess, legally hold both positions at the same time. So if you want to get us on board with the New World Order, make Trump Secretary General, and then we might have us at least listening. And here it goes on, it says of racial or ethnic, these are all the reasons why people are supporting Trumpism around the world, I guess. Or racial, ethnic, or sexual minorities before the majority, putting their rights. Let me just tell you, sexual minorities. There's no such thing as sexual minorities. Yeah, there are people who are gay, but they're just male and female. Now, they may end up deciding to be gay, and I'm not saying that God didn't make them that way. I don't know. You know, that's beyond my pay grade. But I know that there's no such thing as sexual minorities. There are men and there are women, and they make sexual choices. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, I like how they talk about this, because I got a radical idea. How about a constitutional republic to protect this? Because let me tell you, the greatest enemy of any minorities in a country is a total democracy. A total democracy where you have mob rule, where the majority always wins. If you're a minority, if you consider yourself a minority based on any factors, race, or in this case, sexual, whatever, if you are a minority, the greatest protection you could have is a constitution like we have in the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. Because a total democracy means minorities never have their say. And then it goes on to say, of the transgressive before the normal. Now, I just read that because it's in the paragraph. I got to tell you, I'm not even sure what they mean by that. So if you're one of my listeners out there and you want to help me figure this out and you want to explain it to me, then, push it forward here a little bit, because I don't know exactly what they mean by that. But the thing goes on to say, it's talking about this movement around the world. It's a revolt against the people who say, pay an immediate and visible price for a long-term and invisible good. Of course, we can't do that, right? Didn't we just celebrate Memorial Day? I'm not saying all Americans didn't celebrate it. I don't know. But I guarantee you, those that celebrated it for the right reason, a lot of them are MAGA people, America First people, the dregs and deplorables, because we know what the sacrifice, we know what it means to put the greater good above self. We know exactly what that is the very definition of, by the way, of a U.S. soldier. They put country before self, and the left hates them for it. It's a hate, going on back to the article, it's a hatred of those who think they can define that good while expecting someone else to pay for it. So this goodness that they're talking about. Man, the left is the hate group. I hate to tell you snowflakes out there that. The left is the one that's full of hate. The left is the one that their strategy, the progressive left, otherwise known as the Democratic Party's whole strategy, as I've told you before, is to divide people up into groups that might normally not even agree with each other, get them all pissed off, and then get a common boogeyman to unify them back. President Trump, John Martin Talks, for instance, those kind of things. The left pushes hate, not the right, not the MAGA. Let's put it this way: not people who are wearing MAGA hats. They're not pushing hate at all. Go to a Trump rally and show me where the hate is. But they're spending billions of dollars against President Trump. We just talked about that in the previous article. Billions of dollars against Trump, but they say that we're the ones pushing hate. Go ahead, spend all your money. Back to the article. When protests erupted last year in France over Emmanuel Macron's attempt to raise gas prices for the sake of the climate, one Gillette Johnson's slogan, that was the opposition, the yellow jackets, slogan captured the core complaint. Macron is concerned with the end of the world, and we are concerned with the end of the month. Progressive slogan. What would be the progressive counter to that? How about we don't care about now? Because let me just tell you, the progressive left is basically communist. And they're the perfect little communists because they all say, and Macron is basically becoming a little communist, do what I say, not what I do. You look at the progressives in this country that push these billionaires, even Ocasio-Cortez, they don't have to be billionaires. All the Democrats, they say, do as I say, not as I do. And that's what you have to be. That is the core, fundamental, founding principle to be a perfect little communist leader. Back to the article. This is a potent form of politics, and it's why I suspect Trump will be reelected next year, barring an economic meltdown or foreign policy shock. So translation, I hear this all the time. So the translation of this, that if Trump will win as long as the economy stays strong and the world stays somewhat at peace or in somewhat control. So what they're hoping for is that there's an economic meltdown and they need more war. The Democratic Party has become the party of perpetual war. It's unbelievable how much the president has exposed in him. But the writer goes on to say, you may think, as I often do, not me, he, that the administration is a daily carnival of shame. I don't feel that way. I just told you I was very proud of President Trump for standing up for Rolling Thunder. Now, I may not agree with every member of Rolling Thunder. There's 500,000 of them. I don't know if I agree with them all or not, but I agree with their message of freedom and their right to show it and their concern about missing POWs and the missing dead. I mean, so, you know, how can you be opposed to that? But pride in America, man. I can tell you right now, Trump supporters that I know, and they're growing. I hate to tell you all that. There are snowflakes out there. They're growing. We're getting bigger. That they take pride in America. They're not full of shame. They take pride in their president. The writer goes on to say, you may also think that conservatives are even guiltier than liberals and progressives of them before us politics. The 1%ers before the 99%. The big corporations before the little guy, and so on. Sounds to me like he's describing the Democratic Party. The current, I'm not talking about all people who are registered Democrats. You need to take your party back. That's what you need to. Walk away if you want to. But if you want to stay Democrats, take your party back. Because make no mistake, the party of JFK, man, is dead. And the party of AOC and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the radical progressive left, that is who's running your party. Just listen to them. They'll tell you the fact. But this next paragraph, man, reminds me of an old saying about the finger you point is really pointing at you. And that's what this paragraph, because this is what he described. He's trying to describe people that support the president. And I think what he's really describing is people who oppose the president. But the left, here's what he says. The left has a deeper problem. That's partly because it self-consciously approaches politics as a struggle against selfishness. And partly because it has invested itself so deeply and increasingly inflexibly on issues such as climate change. Yeah, that part be true. But, you know, I thought, and I reported on this last week, I thought AOC, Ocasio-Cortez, didn't she say that her comment that we only have 12 years to live was a joke? Was just a joke? And she thought that only people that didn't think it was a joke had the mind of a sponge? I mean, she's talking about her own people. Or how about this? Aren't you actually campaigning on open borders in a welfare state? I mean, isn't that really the problem? It's not. It's the message you're shooting. Not the Trumpism. It's the message that the Democratic Party has been emboldened to the point that they're campaigning on. But he goes on to say, immigration. He said, whatever else might be said about this, it is a recipe for nonstop political defeat, leavened only by the sensation of moral superiority. So he's saying the only comfort basically that the progressive Dems have is moral superiority. Man, what an arrogant, the definition of arrogant a-hole is what he's talking, the 2020 field, man. Progressives are now speeding, he says, speeding Thelma and Louise style. They're going over the cliff, man, toward the same cliff they went over in the 70s to 80s. But unlike the 80s, when conservatives held formidable principles, they're basically saying that we who support Trump have no principles. I thought America first and make America great again was a pretty good principle. About economic freedom and Western unity, the left is flailing in the face of the new right and increasingly nativist, liberal, lawless, and buffoonish. It's losing to losers, he says. Wow. Because we're standing up around the world, the citizens of the world are standing up in freedom where democracy is, by the way. All these countries he's mentioned have the vote, right? And they're voting to put their country's national interest first. They're not voting to say we're not part of treaties and all of that. That's not what they're talking about. An independent England, a Brexit, if you will, is going to be a closer ally to the United States, not a lesser one. Australia is a closer ally to us. India is a closer ally to us. So what they're saying is that these countries who are standing up for their own independence, think about in the case of India, what they had to sacrifice for their own independence. And now he's saying that that independence is not something they should be exercising. It should not be respected. Wow. You talk about a losing philosophy. That is a loser. He goes on to say, it needn't be this way. The most successful left of center leaders of the past 30 years were Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. So bring it back, more old white dudes. That's what the progressive need, by the way. So if you're people of color, the leaders right now are old white dudes, right? Biden and Bernie. And now he's saying that what the world needs to rescue them is more old white dudes. You talk about the party of inclusion. Where are they? They're not including anybody. They're saying, just do what I say, not what I does. They're communists. That's what they are. But he goes on to talk about Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. He said they believed in the benefits of free markets, the importance of law and order, the superiority of Western values, and a healthy respect for moral reflexes of ordinary people within that framework. They were able to achieve important liberal victories, he said. Political blunders and personal shortcomings, I guess they had many, but neither man, I love this part here, neither man would have ever been bested by someone like Trump. Well, I don't know if Bill would have been bested by him, but the greatest candidate in the history of presidential politics got blown away by the president. And it happened to be Bill Clinton's wife. I don't know. And think about this. Tony Blair has come out publicly, it was a few months ago, and said that he might be, like Fonzie, wrong on immigration, that he might actually be wrong. But the guy didn't say anything about that. It's an inconvenient truth, right? So back on this article, I can tell you, this is a great article, man. You need to read it. I didn't edit it much, but I did edit it some, so check it out in the New York Times. Anyone who thinks the most important political task of the next few years is to defeat Trump in the United States and his stooges basically abroad must give an honest account of their stunning electoral success. So it's stunning. They must give Trump credit. Well, I don't expect them to do much of that. Impeach 45. That's the only response they got. Plenty has been said about the effects of demagoguery and bigotry in driving these Trumponian victories. Trump for Secretary of the UN. And the cultural, social, and economic insecurities that fuel populist anxiety. So we're full of anxiety. Go to a Trump rally. Those people look like they're full of anxiety. They look like they're happy, joyous, and free and want to stay that way. Maybe we need to have Trump rallies in India. I don't know. But he goes on, not so often mentioned is the secret of success lies in having opponents who are even less appealing. He's talking about the Democrats, opponents who are even less appealing. He's talking about the 2020 field. Pretty much sums it up, right? In the contrast of ugly, the left keeps winning, whining. What is it? Let me read this again. In the contrast of ugly, the left keeps winning to purpose the line from Trump. Please, please, it's too much winning. I don't know about that. But Trump has them screaming uncle, man. He's got them screaming uncle. Because I'm telling you, while we're winning, they're whining. This whole article is a whining. And there's more whiners to come. So we're going to move on. This next story comes to you from CNN. And as I say, I read and listen to some of these shows and periodicals, so you don't have to. Public service here from JMT and Billy Bob. You're welcome. Angela Merkel warns against dark forces on the rise in Europe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said there is work to be done in Germany to face up to the dark forces that are finding mainstream support there and in other parts of the world. So as I said, while Trump is winning, the others are whining. And Merkel is right at the top of that list, man. She said, in Germany, obviously they always have to be seen in a certain context. Talking about people who are like to the right. Anybody who is like pro their own country is a rightist, a populist. In the context of our past, she says, which means we have to be that much more vigilant than others. So in other words, if you're putting Germany first, that's wrong. And so what we need to do is put what? Germany last? And that's right. That is what actually led up, by the way, to World War II. And I could give you a long history lesson, but basically the Treaty of Versailles that I won't give you the long one, I'll give you the short version, that ended World War I essentially made Germany so weak that it led to World War II, because when people get desperate, they turn to desperate measures. And they turned, in this case, to Adolf Hitler because they were desperate. And that's one of the things that concerns me down like in Venezuela right now. Desperate people will do desperate things. But she goes on to say, we have to tell our young people what history has brought over us and others. So if I'm hearing what she says, and please chime in on John Martin Talks Facebook, Citizens for Trump, please. I'll respond the best I can. And on other places like Deplorable Resistance, thank you so much for listening. But it sounds to me like she's saying that Germany must be destroyed in order for it to survive. I mean, that just seems that way to me. So, help me out on that. In recent days, this is what she goes on to say. In recent days, German Jews were warned by a leading government official not to wear kippahs in public following a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. Addressing the rise in anti-Semitism, Merkel said that Germany has always had a certain number of anti-Semites among us, unfortunately. And she's obviously right about that, but her solution is a bit odd, don't you think? Her solution is to let millions of more people into her country, over a million, I believe, into her country, and millions more throughout Europe that are clearly anti-Semitic. I mean, look at what's happening in Paris, for instance. It's anti-Semitic Muslims. I hate to tell you that. It's the Muslims coming from the areas of the world that say they want to wipe Israel off the face of the globe. And it's happening here in America as well. We're electing them to Congress. They are anti-Semitic. But it's not German Nazis you got to worry about. It's these millions, because I would imagine the Nazi people, they're like, I don't know about in Germany, but like Nazis here in America, they're like minuscule. I'm not saying they're wannabes at best, but they're given great kudos and power by the mainstream media because it fits their narrative. But the fact that there are only a handful of them, they can't mention that. But here, their solution, if they're worried about Nazism and anti-Semitic, is to bring people who are guaranteed anti-Semitic in, because they're saying death to them right as they're coming in. But she goes on to say, there is to this day not a single synagogue, not a single daycare center for Jewish children, not a single school for Jewish children that does not need to be guarded by German policemen. And I'm sure she's right about that. But what is her solution? Letting in millions more anti-Semitic people, guaranteed. That's helped. How? How's that help? It's just crazy. Their logic, man. Merkel, who has been chancellor for more than 13 years, outlasted many global leaders, has shouldered much of the blame for Europe's populist wave. So she's letting, because she basically, Germany has been running the EU, and they've been letting in millions of the religion of peace coming in, and guess what they're spreading? It's not prosperity. With some pitting the spike in the support for the far-right anti-Islam alternative for Germany, AfD, on her handling of the European refugee crisis. Give Merkel some credit, man. Give Merkel some credit. She's talking about their Nazi past. Now keep in mind that Angela Merkel came to power in East Germany. She was an East German under the Russians. Russia, right? So give her some credit because she has accomplished what Hitler and his Nazis never were able to: dominate Europe for decades. She's accomplished that, and she is in the pocket of Putin. She's propping up Putin. The Russians, you want to know why I say that? And the president called her out on this last year. Go back and check out. We talked about it on some of our shows. You can still see all of our shows, by the way, on John Martin Talks Facebook page. I have a YouTube channel that I got to bring up to speed, but it's John Martin Talks as well. But a lot of our all of our shows from last year are on there. But check it out, because it is the Germans, not America under President Trump, that is propping up Putin. It's the Germans with the gas pipelines. They are basically using Russia as their gas pump. That is what's putting billions of dollars in his pocket, not Trump, the Moscow project. If there ever was really a Moscow project, it's the Germans that are doing it. But the chancellor again defended her decision to allow nearly 1 million refugees in Germany. Of course she did, saying that the best way to manage immigration, check this logic, man, check this logic out. She said to manage immigration in the wake of humanitarian crises like those in Syria and Iraq, just known to be friends of Jewish people, right? Cut ourselves off from each other, but to be more vigilant in making sure that refugees fleeing those countries, in other words, the anti-Semitics, are sufficiently cared for. I got a radical idea, and maybe I should run for chancellor in Germany. I don't know. Here's my radical idea. Take care of the German people. Yeah, I said it. Why don't you put the German people first? President Trump, when he said make America great again and put America first, said, and he doesn't get any credit for this in the mainstream media, that he has no issue with other nations putting their interests first. Because you think about it, if every nation put their interests first and then found some way where those interests were of common, they would have true alliances, not the BS alliances that they want that are only good on or just paper tigers. If you want a real alliance, do it from a position of strength. All right, so enough of Angela Merkel. I got to do this. I started not to do this because I know it's controversial. I have a lot of respect for Catholic people. So I want to say that before I get into this article. It's about Pope Francis. And it's coming to you from a publication I'm not familiar with, so I'm taking that with a grain of salt. It's the Straits Times, but it's affiliated with the AP, so perhaps they're a legitimate source. I'm just saying I don't have personal experience with them. Pope Francis sounds racism alarm as EU nationalists win big. So he's basically saying the same thing that Angela Merkel says. Pope Francis warned on Monday, May 27th, against the rise of intolerance and racism as far-right nationalists and Eurosceptic parties made historic gains in European elections. I'm not really familiar with that term, Eurosceptic. It doesn't sound good, so I thought I'd look it up. It says a Eurosceptic is a person who is opposed to increasing the powers of the European Union. Hey, like my brothers in Brexit over there, man. I'm with you. So I guess that makes me a Eurosceptic, man. So let me get this straight, man. I'm an old white dude, Captain Whitebread to the rescue. I'm a MAGA hat wearing son of a gun. This one actually says make fishing great again, just to my little own, because I'm a salty dog. I'm all that. I'm either a dreg or deplorable, depending on which day it is and which one I'm channeling. But now I can add to that list that I am Eurosceptic. The signs of meanness, this is what the Pope said. This is on World Day of Migrants and Refugees. I didn't know there was that, but apparently Monday was that. The signs of meanness we see around us heighten our fear of the other, the unknown, the marginalized, the foreigner. Yeah, like we're opposed to foreigners. Let me get on with it. Let me just ask Pope Francis before I go any further. And I need to hear this from Catholics, man. Please chime in on this. Has he seen how Christians are being treated around the world by the religion of peace? This is the problem. Christians have been under attack. Their lives have literally been snuffed out by the hundreds all over the world. Could that be why people are standing up against this craziness that the Pope is actually saying we need to accept? I mean, man, I'm telling you, and I'm being sincere about this. People who are Catholic, help me understand this, because this Pope doesn't seem like he has Christianity in his, I don't know, I don't want to say that, but it's perplexing to me. Let's put it this way. He goes on to say, and this is something I actually agree with, although probably not for the same reason. He says it's not just about them, but about all of us and about the present and future of the human family. I agree with that. But he goes on to say, migrants, especially those who are most vulnerable, help us to read the signs of the times. Like in Europe, where you're centered, like rape gangs and no-go zones. And those are real, by the way. That's not just my opinionated fact. It's fact over in Europe. It's one of the reasons why there's this, quote, rise of the right nationalists, because they're not actually for no-go zones in their own country, let alone rape gangs. And don't take just my word for it, but you could, but it's real. Nationalist forces from Marine Le Pen in France and Matteo Salvini in Italy, as well as Nigel Farage in Britain, boasted significant gains in the EU Parliament elections, which wound up on Sunday. Now, the only one of these people that I know, when I say no, I mean I've studied pretty much, is Nigel Farage. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm necessarily supporting all of these people, because I want to be truthful with you. I don't know enough to make that statement. Nigel Farage, I feel comfortable saying. But here's the issue I really have here. People voting is a problem for these progressives, and apparently it's a problem for the Pope. You know, we keep hearing this term here in America about voter suppression, voter suppression. And I'm sure there may be some of that going on. But the real problem is coming for the left, because they lack voter acceptance. That's a problem. They won't accept the results of elections. That is the problem. They have not accepted the 2016 election. That is the problem here in this country. They won't accept over in Britain the vote of the people. It's a problem. So it's not voter suppression that's the problem. It's acceptance by the progressive hardcore left, the New World Order people, which it sounds like Pope Francis has become one of those. These are the people that have a problem with voters, not the alt-right, if you want to call them that. But he says here, Salvini's far-right League Party did particularly well in Italy in centers seen as migrant hotspots, including a town held up by the left as a model of tolerance and integration. So anyway, so the Pope goes on to say, but the problem is not that we have doubts and fears. The problem is when they condition our way of thinking and acting to the point of making us intolerant, closed, and perhaps even, without realizing it, racist. So that's another, I'm sick of this, okay? I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. Of course it exists, but you can't legislate what's in a man's heart. And I'll just use America as an example. We have ended institutional racism. There's really no argument against that. You can argue it, but it won't hold water. What's in people's hearts? Sure, there are some. But what I see on a daily basis is America coming together more and more, in spite of the mainstream media and the Democratic leftist progressives, which run your party, by the way, trying to push us apart. I see it as us coming together. And I'm sick and tired of being called racist simply because you stand up for your nation. That you stand up, in this case, for making America great again, keeping America great again, putting America first. If you stand up for that, you're racist. If you're an Italian and you stand up for Italy, are you racist? If you're for Brexit, are you racist? According to the Pope, apparently you are. And I got a problem with that. I don't know. I know it's controversial, but I've never run from controversy. The Pope goes on to say, today's world is increasingly becoming more elitist and cruel towards the excluded. It is not just about migrants. Well, first of all, in this country, our problem is not with migrants. It's with people breaking the law. Illegal immigrants, Pope Francis, with all due respect. But so he's saying that the elite is becoming more cruel towards the excluded. How so, sir? I wish I could have an audience with the Pope. I would ask him this. How so? Because think about it. What the people are rebelling against in these countries is their own people, their own government that are cruel and elitist because they won't accept the will of the people. Do you really believe that what the New York Times guy was talking about that happened in India, the most populous democracy in the world, are all those people misinformed? Are they all racist because they want to put India first, or Australia first, or Austria or Hungary first, or France first? Are they all racist? So in other words, if you are pro your own nation, you are automatically, it sounds like the Pope is saying that you're racist. Well, I hate to tell you, sir, I disagree with you. He also added, wars only affect some regions of the world, yet weapons of war are produced and sold in other regions which are then unwilling to take the refugees produced by those conflicts. There may be some aspects of that, but let me tell you, is there a thread? I would ask you, sir, with all due respect, what is the common thread in all these wars or hotspots around the world? 99.9% of them have one thing in common. They're all being waged by the religion of peace. Everywhere the religion of peace rears its ugly head, we have wars and conflict. Terrorism, which is the main threat to peace-loving people and freedom of religion-loving people, or freedom for religion-loving people, everywhere in the world, freedom for or against religion in the world, where that is being threatened is all being threatened by the religion of peace. So I don't know, Pope Francis. You got some explaining to do. So I would say again, we'll close the show on this. I don't mean to be offensive in this because I have great respect for the Catholic religion. I absolutely do. I would love to have people explain to me where the Pope is right on any of this. It seems to me that he is doing harm to the Catholic religion, but I'm not Catholic. It's just what I see. I could be wrong. I hope you've enjoyed the show today as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. We're going to keep trying our best as long as we have a microphone in front of us, air in my lungs, and that great flag standing behind me. I'm going to give you the unvarnished truth on a daily basis. So thank you for listening. But from my family, as I say to yours every day, from my heart to yours, have a blessed day.